I'd like to go to the ranking member.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to thank you for your generosity and allow me to kind of jump in here right now. Got a few questions, and I'll try to make them relatively quickly about the legislation. And if I may start with you, Mr. Dorn, as I said before, that the current language of the American Recovery Act, whatever the actual name is, provides $7.7 billion for federal building funds for real property activities. Now, $6 billion of this is designated for construction, repair, and alteration of federal buildings for projects that will, and I quote, create the greatest impact on energy efficiency and conservation. My question then, though, is, from your reading of the language of the bill, would that requirement for energy and efficiency and conservation supersede the ultimate goal, which is create jobs and to stimulate the economy?
We have not looked at what the effect of that would be.
All right. Also related to what I said at the beginning, what existing mechanisms, if there are any, are in place to ensure that projects selected are appropriate and consistent with federal priorities? In other words, what mechanisms would you recommend to create, that should be created, to ensure that there's consistency with federal real property management priorities, if any?
There's an existing process now that GSA uses with the prospectus. That y'all mentioned that before, and you also mentioned that I believe that's not part of this bill. Something similar may be helpful for the committee to keep track.
Great. On the same vein, there are a number of projects that this committee has determined that are not appropriate, and therefore their prospectus have not been approved. And is there anything, as far as you can tell, that would prevent these projects from proceeding under the proposed legislation?
Not from what I've read in the legislation.
The proposed bill explicitly allows GSA to initiate leasing, and we know where you are, where GAO has cited that increasing reliance on leasing by the federal government is one reason why the federal real property management remains in the high-risk list. Additionally, increasing leasing means less income for the federal building fund. And would you have any ideas of what we could propose to put into place something that would ensure that this authority would not be overused and abused?
No, sir, we've not looked at that at this point, but we could get back to you for the record.
That would be great. Again, same kind of thing. There are 3 guiding principles highlighted in the GAO's testimony regarding federal buildings, which are: create well-defined goals based on identified areas of national interest, incorporate performance and accountability into funding decisions, and employ the best tools and approaches to emphasize return on investment. What provisions in the proposed legislation would ensure that these principles are applied to the spending of these funds? Any idea? There is
not from my read, and that's why we are concerned that the proper amount of accountability is given without delaying what you're trying to do with the jobs issue.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Bacon, congratulations, by the way. You're building and creating jobs in a moment that doesn't seem like to be happening a lot. So congratulations. Hey, in your testimony, the written testimony, you talked about and noted that there was a number of federal projects that employed this technology, your technology. Is there any way that you can provide examples of the number of jobs for each of those projects generated, based on the size of the project, or is that?
Well, it's a little bit difficult, but take, for example, the Solar Energy Research Association has done some studies on this, and they talked about the direct jobs for, say, a 10-megawatt facility, and I talked about a 12-megawatt facility we did over in Spain, which created jobs both here and in Spain, but we want to do it all here. Just the manufacturing jobs for that is like 140. Installation jobs, there are another 3, and then there's ongoing O&M. But that's just what you're putting together on the roof. Now, we also have to, for example, in Battle Creek, we're building a building in a greenfield spot. So we're building our own buildings, so we've got construction people that are doing that. We're putting them to work. We're also, our company manufactures some of the very high-tech equipment. We also buy from other U.S. companies with that. So when you get that amplification effect, including when you're looking at the supply chain, which most of our supply chain is also U.S. We had been buying some steel from Japan, but we're weaning off of that and getting U.S. sources. There's probably easily a multiplier of 10 with those numbers. Looking at with industry, if we put, say, a $10 billion program together to put photovoltaics on all the roofs of federal buildings, which we believe in the long run is going to save the federal government money. Keep in mind these last for 25 years. You have hardly any O&M because the sunshine comes. We're looking at creating between 350,000 and 500,000 sustainable jobs. It's not something that just we're going to do. And the last point I'd like to make with that too, when I talk sustainable, photovoltaic industry is growing dramatically, mostly overseas. We have less than 10%, even though Bell Labs introduced this and did the inventing with it. It's supposed to go from 2.8 gigawatts in 07, we don't have all the 08 numbers, to 2012, 16 gigawatts. So when you're thinking about jobs and creating jobs here, I think you want to think about not just shovel ready when we do that, which I'm all for it, but how is it going to create other industries that we, the U.S., can help regain our leadership that we once had in this area. And I think the green-collar jobs, the sustainable jobs, they're very important. And we have a lot of experience, too, in being able to retrain workers. For example, in Greenville, Electrolux moved out. It was one of our other facilities that I mentioned. Everybody was unemployed. And I have to tell you, it was one of the most emotional groundbreakings I've ever been to, because I've been to all of them. You know, these unemployed workers came up and said, we know you could put this plant anywhere in the world, and you chose us, and we're not going to let you down. And they didn't. We retrained the workers, and this is very high tech. So I think there are a lot of strings that come into this that need to be considered.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Balart.